Hey everybody, good morning. It is day 93. Day 93 of Spiritual Healthcare. Welcome. It is good to be back. It's been a week since since we were last here, and it is good to see everyone. I was away for a little bit and am now back in town, so we are back here yet again with another wonderful spiritual healthcare morning. So good morning to everyone. It is good to see you. As I say, day 93, and we're going to be chatting about a topic that has been on the table that people have been asking for now for a little while, which is the concept of malignant narcissism. So we're going to tackle that this morning, and it's going to be really good. I also got a fantastic question that's come in about animal spirits and how they present themselves. So we're going to chat about that as well. As I say, we've got lots to cover today. I'm excited. It's good to see all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And yeah, as I say, I hope you guys have had really good weather wherever you are. We are in rain here, and where I was in Vancouver for a week, and we had this mix of rain and sun, but the sun was just ridiculously intense. Good morning to Kaz, good morning to Patricia, good morning guys, morning everybody. It's nice to see everyone. Post in the comments that you're here so I know that you guys are here. It's just nice to see everybody in the morning, and as I say, I missed you guys. It's been a little bit, so this is good. We get back on track, we get back to our spiritual healthcare. Lots of information today about the difference between narcissism and the personality disorder spectrum and whatever. It's going to be really good. Good morning to Lori. Nice to see you. Nice to see everybody. It's always so good to see everyone coming in the morning. Yeah, we ended up we ended up sitting on the water for quite a while the other day, and it was warm outside, but the water reflecting off the the sun reflecting off the water ended up, I got this sunburn, which is nowhere near what it was. It's nowhere near what it was. This is way toned down, this sunburn right now. Good morning to Brandy and Shadow and Jeremy. Nice to see you. Jeremy says, send me that rain. Yeah, we actually, rain in Edmonton right now anyway, at least. We got a storm last night. We've been having this weird weather where it's been up and down and crazy. But yes, this is my new tattoo, my new look of sunburn. But it was, yeah, we both of us got nailed, so I don't know. But needless to say, this is actually way less than what it was a day ago. It looks so much better. It was an interesting plane ride home, that's for sure. Good morning to Eric. Good morning to everyone. And Des, nice to see you. Yeah, it's really good for anybody that is that has to travel over the next little while. This was my first plane ride since the pandemic and whatnot. For anybody that has to travel, definitely, of course, wear your mask. Is really, really important. It's mandatory on most airlines right now anyway. But the airlines, I have to give a shout out and kudos to Air Canada, because they just did such an incredible job of keeping everybody safe and socially distanced and work. It was awesome. It was just awesome. So yeah. So kudos to Air Canada and whatnot. And even they even noticed when I got back on the plane. They're like, oh, "You're sunburned." I'm like, "Yeah." Thanks for pointing it out, though. Thank you. I wouldn't have noticed had you not pointed it out. So yeah. So anyway. We've got lots to chat about today. As I say, we're talking about animal spirits and their form, as well as the topic of malignant narcissism, because we've been, for the prior two classes, we've been talking about the narcissistic personality and whatnot, and how it reflects into clients that we're interviewing, or people that we have to deal with in the field, and all sorts of things like that. And it's such a prominent topic, as so many people have been asking about it, and I think there's just so much to talk about it. They actually fall into something that the DSM calls a cluster B personality disorders. So we'll chat about that as well. So, but the first question that I wanted to grab today actually came from Twitter, from Cha Ling on Twitter. And I thought this was a really interesting question. And it was, why do animal spirits present as an actual animal, but people seem to only be in shadow form? So I thought this was a really cool question, because it does beg the question, why do these different apparitions show up in different ways, right? Oh, and Marge is here. Marge is here. Yay! Hi, Marge. And she says she became a grandma last night. Congratulations! Congratulations! That's exciting. Oh, that's so awesome. So you have to post what their name is and whatnot. That's fantastic. Congratulations. What a happy thing to celebrate. So yeah, so why do they do that? Why do we see animals as actual animals but people in shadow form? So there's a couple of different types of apparitions that we end up seeing, right? We end up seeing things like shadow forms, or half of somebody walking around a corner, or like apparitions come in a variety of different things and different wavelengths, I guess. Our eyes perceive them in different ways. But I think sometimes when it comes to things like animals or individuals and things like that, I really think that how we view an apparition oftentimes will be because of our own perception and perceptive abilities. So, and the reason why I say this is because there's been a number of encounters of people that are viewing apparitions and things like that, where they are sitting, there'll be 3 or 4 people sitting in a room, and everybody doesn't always perceive stuff the same way. People just don't always perceive it the same way. They will see an apparition, say, for example, of a loved one, and everybody in the room will see them at a different age. So I don't necessarily think that it's something to do with how that maybe the entity is choosing to project itself, but more about how our eyes are choosing to, or our brains and whatnot are choosing to perceive or translate that information. So there's been a lot of correlation about that. Also, I think we have less resistance, I think, when it comes to animal spirits. I think, I feel like we just have less resistance about it. We tend to think of seeing spirits and things like that as something that might be frightening and whatnot. But when you think about seeing the spirit of a dog, they're often thought of as protectors, as sort of visitors that are coming. Like we just have a lot of positive thoughts and associations with it. So I question whether that has something to do with the clarity in which we perceive them also. So it's hard, as I say, there's no definitive answer to it. That's kind of my take on why it might be happening. Because yeah, we see things just so differently, and everybody's got these individual perceptions. The other thing that I've questioned over the years as well, because oftentimes apparition encounters will sound like, okay, I saw this person come into the room and they moved around the corner and disappeared, or they vanished before my eyes, or we hear about that type of a phenomenon quite frequently, and I have a theory about that. And I question whether it's because people are perceiving the light in a certain way, and when that light bends, those light particles bend in which we're perceiving the apparition. Once those light particles bend, they disappears to our eyes, kind of like the Harry Potter's invisibility cloak, right? Or the invisibility shields in Star Trek or something like that. It's not that the ship is disappearing. It's literally just that the light bends in a certain way, and now all of a sudden something looks like it vanishes. So I question whether or not that has something to do with apparitions too. Is that they're not actually disappearing. They're just disappearing because the light is bending a different way. It's turned a corner, or we've turned in a various way where it's caused the apparition to seem like it's disappearing. So anyway, that's my theory on the whole thing. That's my theory on the whole thing. All right, so that being said, so for the last couple of days, we've talked about the idea of narcissistic personalities when we're dealing with people that in the field, in our jobs, in our social circles, families, all sorts of things like that. And there's this subcategory of narcissism that I think has to be talked about, because it's slightly different than what we would consider a narcissistic person. So when we talk about narcissism itself, we're talking about not a term that just means somebody that's high on themselves, right? Because the term gets thrown around a lot. According to the DSM, Diagnostic Manual for Statistical Medicine, the DSM-5 it actually classifies narcissism as it's a personality disorder. Okay, so that means part of the brain is affected. This is a personality disorder. This isn't just a term to be thrown around. malignant, both narcissism, psychopathy, histrionic personality, borderline personality, antisocial personality, all of these fall into a category called cluster B disorders. And the combinations of these disorders, if you've got more than one, ends up creating a whole new type of situation with a person. So, for example, narcissistic personality disorder coupled with antisocial personality disorder gets you malignant narcissism. So it's a combination of two different things. The term started from two doctors, Eric Fromm and Otto Kernberg, and they came up with the term. They did some research and they realized, because they started to notice that like narcissistic personality disorder is a spectrum problem. It's kind of in the same way autism is a spectrum disorder. It affects people differently. Narcissism is also a spectrum disorder. But it's a personality disorder, not a physical thing like autism or anything like that. But this is a little bit different, although it does affect parts of the brain. So the main difference between narcissistic personality and the malignant narcissist is a couple of things. First of all is sadism. Okay, so the main difference with them is the fact that a narcissist, even though they will kind of hurt you and, you know, go about their day and not have a clue, the malignant narcissist tends to be extremely, they get pleasure in the fact that you are hurting. So they will set up situations in order to make sure that you are hurting and then get a kick out of it. Right? So that's the main difference between the malignant narcissist and the regular narcissist. And what separates this, because it looks very, very close to antisocial personality, what separates it is their delusions of grandiosity. So they're still in the la-la land about some fantasy world that they've created. And that's a really, really dangerous situation. And of course, we're seeing it in things like politics right now. We're seeing characteristics of this that are popping up all over the place in various people, especially when it comes down to things like the pandemic and stuff like that. We're seeing every time there's a stressful situation, oftentimes these characteristics start to pop up. So people that are, for example, having issues, what I've noticed in my life with the few that I've dealt with, oftentimes financial situations, like desperate financial situation, will drop the mask of a narcissist or a malignant narcissist very quickly. I had actually a really interesting discussion about this week, because I was reading, my partner and I were reading a biography on Walt Whitman, of all people. And the biographer's take on it was very interesting, because we went along and we noticed that his position on things like flip-flopped all the time, and it was like trying to nail Jello to the wall about this character, where he seemed to be flip-flopping back and forth. And what we realized that near the end of it was that it seemed like, at least based on the information by the biographer, that there might have been some narcissistic tendencies with the famous poet Walt Whitman as well, it was very interesting. It was very, very eye-opening to read this book right through to the end. So we're almost done, but it's really interesting. So anyway, so what creates this? Like, what is going on in the brain when we're talking about this? So in 2013, the University of Germany did a study, and they noticed that there was actually less gray matter around the areas of empathy in the brain. So basically what this is like a busted right anterior, what they call the insular cortex, which is the area of our brain that processes empathy. So it's literally busted. And this is one of the things that I so want to get across to people when they're dealing with individuals like this, is that it's not that they don't want to do a thing. It's not that they don't learn, like they just need to learn empathy, or they need to learn to be better. They physically cannot. Their brains are not wired the same way our brains are. They are literally perceiving information different. So Marge is saying, evil, I had to put my husband out. I felt there was a dark force field in my house, and it felt very heavy and dark walking around in it. And that's the thing, these people, they create this type of energy. And they often can seem like this black cloud that's kind of in your space. And the hard part about them is that even though they tend to be extremely angry and depressive people, they also know how to put a great big smile on their face, and like everything is totally amazing and fine. So it's something that it can be really, really tricky, because the people that are dealing with them end up feeling a lot of anxiety. They end up feeling frightened. They end up feeling just like things are off and displaced, and they can't figure out why, because this, they've got this person in their house that, what could possibly be the problem? So it can be a really, really toxic situation. And we know that, when we've got a situation where we've got negative focus in a space for too long, oftentimes they end up brooding all sorts of negative consciousness and entities and all sorts of things like that. Because where you are emotionally is where you're attracting from. It was really interesting because when I finally got rid of the one in my life, I had a barrage of paranormal experiences. It happened after he left. It was like his, like that focused consciousness was still hanging around. And I ended up having to really implement my own program, really walk the walk with Teaching the Living in order to get rid of it. And it took about a week, but once I was able to purge it and set my boundaries in the space, it left, and it hasn't been back. But it got very, very interesting. There was a number of things that went missing over that time period. I had a number of books disappear. I had various like personal items disappear, and some of Galen's stuff, my python, some of his stuff disappeared as well. And what was fascinating was that when I demanded the stuff back, not to the malignant narcissist, but to the energy in the space, the next day the items ended up showing back up. And it was very, very interesting. But there seemed to be something that was very conscious that was there after he left. It was really interesting. So I would say, so there is the main thing to really take away from this is the fact that, as I say, these people are incapable of feeling empathy, and this is an information processing problem. And their perspective on the world tends to hurt people just in general. It's what they do. They just can't help themselves. There's something called seeing the world through a primitive binary lens. Okay, this is getting into a psychology term, but a primitive binary lens. So that basically means very black and white thinking. Like, it's either good or it's bad. There's no middle ground at all. You're either stupid or you're smart, or there's just no middle ground with these people. So they tend to be very, very black and white. And then you couple that with, as I say, no empathy, very much out for themselves, no ability to see around corners. This is another big one. Their ability to plan ahead is almost zero. They have a terrible time planning forward. They can't really see around corners. And my partner he's funny because he always calls them non-learners, and because they tend to be in the same situation over and over and over and over again. The problem is when we get into malignant narcissism, you've got that aspect of the sadism where they are looking to set situations up where people are getting victimized. So, for example, it might be a situation where you've got like a triangle of some sort. Maybe it's like a love triangle, or maybe it's like triangulation at work, where you've got multiple people that are, they're turning them against each other. I had this happen to me with one of the production companies that I work with the narcissist that I had to deal with. And we had a contracted show with this person, and he ended up triangulating the company, the venue, and himself against each other. And thank God we knew, because we knew how these people work, and we were able to get a hold of the hall so that we were chatting back and forth with them, so he couldn't pivot the situation against us. But it was one of those scenarios where it's like, if you're not aware, it becomes really easy to not speak to that other person, believe what they're saying, and forget the communication, and everything gets lost. So it's really, really interesting to see how they will do it, but it's extremely manipulative and it can be really dangerous. The lengths to which they will go once they know your hot buttons, and once they know how to manipulate in that way, it's pretty extensive. They will go pretty hardcore with what they will do to see that situation work and turn in their favor. If they discover, for example, that you are fearing abandonment, or you're fearing, being left, or you fear that maybe, I don't know, somebody's cheating on you, or, something like anything like that. Or even you fear maybe losing your daughter or child, or, who knows, something like that. They will push that hot button in order to get you to do what they want. And we have to remember as well that the number one tool of any abuser is isolation. We have to remember this. So if you guys are dealing with one, I actually had a friend of mine recently who was she was breaking up with one and trying to get out of a situation like that. That we have to remember the number one tool of theirs is isolation. So if they can stop people, if they can stop you from phoning people, if they can tell you people are negative or bad, or you're hurting their feelings because you're doing X, Y, Z, or whatever, they will play all of those cards in order to make sure that you're completely dependent on them for everything. So it's something to be very, very aware of, and all the more reason to be able to reach out to people as well if you're finding that this is what's going on. So something to really pay attention to. So this is basically. This primitive binary lens, this very black and white thinking, is a result of, as I say, information processing and problems processing, specifically emotional thinking. So this is the other part of it. It's a faulty neurobiology is basically what it comes down to. So, and it's something we have, as I say, we got to be aware of when we're dealing with, we're just dealing with clients, whether you're dealing with people in your life. For me, of course, in the entertainment field, it's a huge thing, to run into to people that can be this way. And the more, we expand into the world, the more we have to be conscious of our awareness and our own sense of self. So how do we deal with this? Like, once we figure it out, once we know that we've got somebody like this around us, how do we avoid it to begin with anyway? And I think the big thing is to really just is to be able to do the emotional work for yourself, because the less triggers that you have, the less buttons there are for these people to push, and the less fun you are to them, as cold as that sounds. But it really does make a big difference. If you have less buttons to be pushed, then the odds are you're not going to have an issue with people like this at all anyway, because you're just no fun. So that's a big part of it. It also allows you to, when something starts to feel really weird, when something starts to feel off with somebody, you're way more likely to pick up on it and to stop and go, hold up. This isn't acceptable, or this isn't cool. Something is really wrong here. What do I do? And it allows you to kind of take a step back and realize that, your gut instinct is telling you something. Just in the same way that when you walk into a place with a negative entity or anything like that, your gut is telling you something is just off. And it does the same thing when it comes to things like malignant narcissism. There was or any sort of, toxic person at all. There was a very interesting case here in Edmonton years and years ago, in the 1900s. One of our first Canadian serial killers, his name was James Bluebeard Watson, and he started off in California. He ended up coming up to Canada because he was being chased on accounts of bookkeeping. He had arrest warrants out for him. And when he finally settled in Edmonton, he ended up murdering quite a number of women. And what his shtick was that he was very charming, as most of these people are. They're not big, scary monsters. They tend to be very charming, very engaging, very enthusiastic. Definitely the type of person that you'd want to bring home. Like, they can often be, their mask is extremely good. And So he ended up basically getting like numerous of these women into these long-term relationships, and then once he got them settled enough, he would kill them. So when he settled in an apartment building in downtown Edmonton here, that used to be here anyway, called the Arlington, and he would murder these women, and he would end up keeping as a souvenir the marriage license and the wedding ring. So what was so interesting about this story is the fact that the woman who finally called a private investigator, this one woman, she suspected that something wasn't right. Now, the odds are probably the other women did too, at least on some level. But this was the first girl that actually didn't ignore it, didn't ignore that intuition and thought, damn it, something's up, something is is just off. So she ended up calling a private investigator, and of course she wasn't thinking that this was a murderer. She was thinking, well, he's cheating on me, or he's lying, or something's wrong. And they discovered that, lo and behold, he'd murdered dozens of women, and they still don't know what the body count is. He ended up being extradited back to California and died in San Quentin prison. But it was such a fantastic example of somebody finally understanding and listening to that intuition and realizing that they had someone with a, like, just probably some sort of psychopath or something like that. And it was, pretty unnerving stuff. So, not to say that they're all, murderers and killers, but, that it's the extreme end of the scale, and it's all a spectrum. So all these cluster B disorders. So it's really interesting. So hold on, question. So Trey is asking, what would you say if you could predict what happens anywhere? If you could visualize it, if it actually happens, that would be really interesting. I don't know. I think we do have the ability to kind of predict to a point, what's going on around us. I think if we're paying attention, over the years, I've become really good at seeing around a lot of corners. Like not too much escapes me for the most part anymore. But I think a lot of that has to do with that ability to sort of sit back and listen to yourself and pay attention to that source energy. I think it is communicating with us all the time. And I think if we are able to sort of take a step back and stop and look, I think it gets pretty close to being able to predict some of this stuff. It's really true. Kaz is saying, always listen to your gut. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It really makes a massive difference. And I think, people ask, well, what do you mean, listen to your gut? It seems like a really cliche expression, but our gut is so in tune on a physical level with our emotions. A lot of people, when they're having emotional stress, get an upset stomach or have digestive problems or things like that. Our physical body is really in tune to this stuff. Louise Hay, for example, like, she came out with this amazing list, and you guys can find it online, of different ailments and things like that are, and what emotion and what state of being they tend to be related to. And it's really interesting. So if you guys want to look that up, it's if you look up Louise Hay, Heal Your Life, symptoms or anything like that, you're going to find this list. It's fascinating. You will never look at symptoms the same way ever again. But it's really intriguing. Marge was saying my anxiety level was through the roof. Yeah, that's the thing. And here's the damn thing too, is that people don't realize often that their anxiety levels are actually tied in with the abuser. Like, we don't really make that connection very much. But the physical effects on our bodies are it's horrendous. People get sick. I had a friend who was dealing with one of these people, and she ended up nearly to the point where she couldn't walk. She was an absolute mess, and it wasn't until that she got herself out of that situation where all of a sudden she started to heal up again and whatnot. It was really crazy. But what this creates in our bodies, and that toxicity and that anxiety, it's really detrimental. And post-traumatic stress as well. A lot of people that leave these situations have PTSD from the psychological abuse that goes on. We tend to read into things. We tend to, be questioning other people and their motives and intentions, and also it's nuts. It can really mess you up. So yeah, it's something we have to be really careful of. And when we see these people coming, run, because they don't get better in therapy. As much as we might, love them or whatever, because oftentimes we think to ourselves, well, if they just got into therapy. But the sad part is about people like this is that the therapy at the end of the day oftentimes just teaches them how to be better at what they're doing, because they learn the speak, they learn how to talk a good talk, they learn how to mimic empathy, and then you've got a real problem because they become a lot harder to identify and a lot harder to deal with. So sometimes therapy is it's not a good thing. Trey was saying he needs to get his anxiety checked out. Yeah, it's so important, because I think we don't realize how easy it becomes to make that a normal, where we become very accustomed to that feeling of being on edge all the time. And it is so easy to fall into that norm and just think, oh no, I'm fine. Oh no, I'm fine. If I'm not severely depressed, then I must be okay. And that's not okay in and of itself. We have to hold our emotions to a higher standard and realize that we all deserve joy. That should be the standard. Our bar and our measure should be joy. At least get to happy, and make that our goal, our bar. And anything beneath that, we gotta clean stuff up. We gotta clean stuff up because we deserve that. Marge is saying she's in therapy and has been for a couple of years, which he didn't like because you became more aware of his tricks. Yeah, the more that we call these people out. So here's the crazy thing with this, when we do see them, when you start to see them for who they are, they tend to just get really mad. The malignant narcissists, you have to be very careful of, because they can become very dangerous. Once that mask drops with somebody like a malignant narcissist, oftentimes they can get very abusive because they stop caring whether or not you see them. You see that front. So we have to be extremely careful. If you are in a situation where you've got a partner or living with somebody who's a malignant narcissist or you think is one of these toxic people, it doesn't matter what their label is, and whatnot, make sure that you seek the help and support before leaving, because here's the thing, it's the leaving that oftentimes will send these people over the edge. And it's not to deter the person, not to deter you from actually leaving the situation, because you have to, but to be aware that once that narcissist or that malignant narcissist feels like they're losing control, then they tend to go, their behavior tends to skyrocket, and they want to get that control back. So if there's a domestic violence situation, whether it be emotional violence or physical violence, once that control is lost, they start to really go over the deep end. So if there's going to be an episode of violence, oftentimes it's during that period where that person is leaving. So to have a plan to make sure that you've got resources through like a domestic violence center or something like that, absolutely crucial, because they tend to go right over the deep end. So it's really important. So and as I say, oftentimes what will happen with characters like this is it will come with, say, negative hauntings or some sort of strange, weird paranormal activity, because you've got all this negative focus, all this negative energy that's getting poured in, and one oftentimes will come with another. So when we're dealing with these types of entities, we have to be very aware. So tomorrow, that's what we're going to talk about, is the paranormal effects of people like this and what happens. What do you do? How do you deal with it? We'll keep going from there. So, but I wanted to read you guys a segment from our wonderful Miss Iyanla Van Zandt from Faith in the Valley, because I think this is a really crucial, it's a lead-in to tomorrow morning. Because tomorrow morning, we're going to be talking about the paranormal side of this, as well as our own ownership in it. Because we've talked about them, but we have ownership in it as well. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So check this out. Before you get angry with someone for what they have done or not done to you, honestly ask yourself, what role did I play? Before you get angry or dismiss the question, honestly ask yourself, did I say yes when I wanted to say no? Did I say no when I really wanted to say yes? Did I really trust this person? Did I go into the situation in doubt, in fear? Before you start beating up on yourself or anyone else, honestly ask yourself, when did I see this before? When was the last time I was in this place, feeling this way? Before you give yourself a headache, Say something you will be sorry for later, or slump into the valley of depression or anger. Honestly ask yourself, what is the lesson here? Interesting. So that's what's going to be tomorrow. So that being said, peace affirmations, everybody, because we haven't done them for like a week. We haven't done them for like a week, so let's do it. So everybody take a breath. I'm a channel of peace and well-being, and my need for peace is abundantly met. I unconditionally accept, love, and appreciate myself and who I am. I recognize and am grateful for the abundance that is constantly flowing into my life, which I can choose to allow or not. I feel with every breath a sense of peace and love. I help others by maintaining and tending to my connection with Source as much as possible. This well-being is accessible to me, even in a sea of uncertainty. And at this moment, all is well. I am able to liberate myself from my past and live with peace and serenity. I can see and appreciate all the beauty and abundance of the life around me, and I am able to embrace love while letting go of fear. I find peace with the soothing silence of my inner being. Everybody take a breath. Thank you guys so much for another awesome morning. Day 93, guys, spiritual health care. So tomorrow we'll be back and tackle this a little bit further. And what do we do with situations like this? What do we do? So that being said, I will see you guys tomorrow morning. Have an amazing day, everybody. And Marge is saying Haunted Hospitals is on now. Excellent. Yay, that's good to know. See you guys tomorrow. Of course, you can catch up on all the other classes. On the other classes, if you missed the other classes on narcissism, they are on the Entity Seeker YouTube channel, youtube.com/entityseeker or entityseeker.ca. So that being said, I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everybody.